The book of Isaiah is 66 chapters long. It was written during a period that spans from the 8th century BC to the 6th century BC. And during that time span, it was probably written by 3 different people. There are 3 themes that run throughout those 66 chapters. They are all political, and I want to explore them with you now. The first political theme is based after chapter 2, verse 4. Isaiah says, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more." A lot of people want to say that this is for a time way off into the future, maybe heaven. But that's not what Isaiah is saying. Isaiah is saying, live into this reality now, and it's our job to do that. So when the kings of Judah ask the prophet Isaiah what they should do in the face of military threats coming from the Assyrian Empire and from other surrounding nations, Isaiah says, do not make alliances with other nations. He even says in chapter 31, do not rely on horses or trust in chariots. These were the tanks of the ancient world. Isaiah says, trust in God. Now you can imagine what the kings are going to say about this. Trusting in God is only going to take us so far. This is probably going to get us killed. Isaiah's political point is to trust in God and not in human violence. Which leads us to the second political theme in Isaiah. Second Isaiah claims that the job of the people of God is to be a light to the nations. And here's the thing. You cannot be a light to the nations when you fight darkness with darkness. You cannot be a light to the nations when you use violence. And we should all know that Isaiah is not naive. What ends up happening in 2nd Isaiah is the suffering servant, the one who is beaten by the nations. But the point is bigger. The point is to be a light to the nations in order to lead to the third theme in Isaiah, which is the reconciliation of the nations. You see this throughout Isaiah, but specifically in chapter 25, when all of the nations come together to God's party. Isaiah says in chapter 25 that the nations will come to God's mountain, and the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines, of rich food filled with marrow, of well-aged wines strained clear. And he will destroy on this mountain the shroud that is cast over all peoples, the sheet that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. Then the Lord God will wipe away the tears from all faces, and the disgrace of his people will be taken away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. God's salvation involves all of the nations, and it will come when God's people respond to violence with nonviolence, respond to violence with compassion and love and mercy and the hope for reconciliation. That is the message of Isaiah, and it's the message that he is inviting us to live into.